In this video, I will show you how to add PayPal payments in ASP.NET MVC. So in this page, we can provide the order amount. Then let's click on PayPal. Let's log in using PayPal account. Let's click on Complete Purchase. And here we can see that the payment is completed successfully. Then in the next video, I will show you how to buy products using PayPal. So we can go to the home page and let's buy this product, for example. So let's click on this button and we obtain this page. So this is the order amount. Let's click on PayPal. Here we have the order amount. Let's click on Complete Purchase. And here we can see that the order is created successfully. So as administrator, we can see the list of orders by clicking on this orders item. And here we have the different orders. So this is the last created order. And to have more details about this order, we can click on this button. So in this page, we will display the order details and the payment details by sending a request to PayPal. And to see the PayPal response, we can click on this button. So here we have PayPal response, which is a JSON object. So here we have the order amount, we have PayPal fee, and we have the net amount. And we can see that the payment status is completed. So the administrator is able to click on this button to refund the client. So let's click on this button. So now we can see that the payment status is refunded and we don't have the refund button anymore. We can also find the order details on the PayPal business account. Let's log in using the business account, then activity, then all transactions. And here we have all the transactions. So this is the last transaction. We can click on this link. So here we have the payment details. So this is the payment ID that we have just here. We can see that the payment status is refunded. And we can see that the order contains this item. To add PayPal payment in ASP.NET, we need first to create a PayPal developer account. So here let's type PayPal developer. Let's go to the first link. Then log in. So if you don't have an account, you can click on sign up to create a new account. But in my case, I already have an account, so I will use my credentials. So here we can see that I am using PayPal in the test mode. And to make real payments, you need to select the live mode. Then we need to create a new application. But first we need to create a new business account that will be used to receive the payments. So let's click on Testing Tools, then Sandbox Accounts. And here we can see that I have these accounts, so we can use them, but I prefer to create new accounts. So let's create the new business account. Let's select business. We can also select the country, then create account. And here we can see that I have this new account. So this account will be used to receive the payments. Then I need to create another account that will be used to make the payments. So let's create a new account. Let's select personal, let's select the country, then create account. And we can see that I have this new account. So we can click on this account. So here we have the email address and this is the password. Now let's create a new application for this business account. So let's click on Apps and Credentials. Let's create a new application. Let's give it a name. I will call it Best Store App. And let's select the business account. Then create app. So this application has been created successfully and we need to save the client ID and the secret. So let's go to our application. Let's go to appsettings.json. And let's create a new section. We can call it PayPal settings. So we need the client ID. We can copy it from here. Then we need the secret. So we can copy it from here. And we need the URL of PayPal server. So we can click on APIs and SDKs, then REST APIs. Let's click on API requests. So here we can see that for testing purpose we can use this URL, and for real payments we can use this second URL. So we can copy this URL from here. And let's paste it here. Let's save the file. Now let's create a new controller. So I will create it in the controllers folder. Let's call it checkout controller. Then we need to read PayPal settings from appsettings.json. So let's define several properties. So we can define PayPal client ID, PayPal secret, and PayPal URL. Then let's create the constructor to read the data of appsettings.json. Let's request an object of type iConfiguration. Then let's read PayPal settings. So for the PayPal client ID, we will read the section PayPal settings, then client ID. So this is PayPal settings and this is client ID. Then we will read the secret and the PayPal URL. So to send requests to PayPal server, we need to obtain a JSON Web Token. So to obtain this token, let's go to the documentation website, and here we can click on authentication. Then we need to send a post request to the URL that ends with this extension, and we need to include the client ID and the client secret. We need to define the content type, which is this type, and also we need to include this data. So let's create a new method. So we can create this private method that returns a string, which is the JSON Web Token, and we can call it getPayPalAccessToken. So here we can define this string, which is an empty string, and we can return it. Then we need to send a request to PayPal server. So we can create this URL, which is the PayPal URL plus this extension. Then we need to create the HTTP client. Then we need to create the credentials, which will be composed by the client ID, then colon, then the PayPal secret. Then we need to add the credentials to the header. Then here we have the message. So the message will be transmitted using the post method to this URL. The content will be this content, and this is the content type. Then we need to send this request message, and we will obtain the response. Here we can see that we have this error because we are using await into this function that is not asynchronous. So to fix this, just here we can add async task. Now let's read the JSON Web Token from the response. So if we have a success response, then we will read the response as a string, then we will read the response as a JSON object. So the response is a JSON object, and we can take a look at an example of the response. So here we can see that we have this example. It is a JSON object that contains the access token, and we need to read the access token. So here we will read the access token from the response, and this is the access token name, and we will return the access token. Now we can test this method by creating a new action. So just here we can create a new action. So we can create this action that will return the access token. Now let's save the file and let's test the application. Now here let's add the name of the controller and the name of the action. So the controller is the checkout controller and the action is token. Then enter. And we obtain this JSON Web Token. Now we don't need this action anymore, so we can comment it. Now let's add PayPal buttons to the view. So here we have the index action and we need to create the view. So we can make a right click, then add view. And let's call it index.cshtml. let's delete the command. And to add PayPal buttons, we need to go to the documentation website of PayPal. So here let's go to APIs and SDKs and let's click on JavaScript SDK. Then complete reference. Then here we have how to create an order. So we have this example and we need first to include PayPal JavaScript. So let's copy this script element. And let's paste it here. So here we need to add the client ID. So the client ID is available in this property and we need to add it to ViewBag. So just here we can add ViewBag. And we can add a new property called PayPal client ID, which is equal to the PayPal client ID property that we have just here. Now let's copy this. Let's delete this value. Then let's add parentheses, and let's paste the name of the variable. Then let's create the view. So we can add this div that will be displayed in the center of the page. We can define the width of this div, and we can add a rounded border. Then we can display the text, complete your order. Then here we have another div that contains a label with the text total amount. And we have this input field that allows the user to define the amount of the order. So we can provide this input field with an ID. Like this, we can read the content of this input field using JavaScript code. Then we can add this div to display any notification, and this div will be used to display the PayPal buttons. So to add the PayPal buttons, let's go back to the documentation website of PayPal. And let's copy this script element, so it contains the PayPal buttons. Let's paste it here. So when we click on the PayPal buttons, this method will be executed and it will send a request to our application. So we can change the URL and we will send a request to the same controller, which is the checkout controller. So here we can add /checkout / the name of the action. So we can send a request to the action called create order, for example. So we will send a JSON object, and for the moment we have this content. So we don't need to send this content. Let's delete it and let's replace it with the order amount. So let's define a key called amount, and we can read the amount from this input field having this ID. So when we send a request to this action, the action should reply with a JSON object that contains the order ID. And here we can see that we will display the PayPal buttons into a div having this ID, which is the ID of this div. So when we click on the PayPal buttons, we will send a request to this URL. So we can define the URL either statically like this, or we can define it using a helper. So I will use a helper. So let's delete this. And let's replace it with the URL action link. This is the name of the action and this is the name of the controller. We can also display an alert in this div if we have an error. So just after this method, just here, we can add comma. And we can add on cancel and on error. So if the payment is cancelled, we can display this bootstrap alert with the text payment cancelled, and we will display it in the div having this ID. And if we have any error, we will display another alert with this error. An error occurred, please retry later. Now let's add a link to this page in the navbar. So we can copy this item. Let's paste it here. Then here we can write checkout. So the controller is the checkout controller. And the action is the index action. Let's run the application. Let's click on checkout. And we obtain this page. So let's provide the amount of the order, then PayPal. But here we can see that we have this error. So when we sent a request to create order, we did not receive the order ID. That's why we have the error. So now let's create the create order action of the checkout controller. So let's stop the application. So we can create this method, create order, that will handle post requests, and it will return a JSON object. So we will read the JSON object from the request body, and we need to read the amount. So amount that we have here is this amount. So if the total amount is null, then we will return a JSON object with ID equal to an empty string. So ID that we have here is the ID that is expected by PayPal buttons. Otherwise, if the amount is not null, in this case we need to send a request to PayPal server. So here let's click on APIs and SDKs, then REST APIs, then orders, then create order. So here we can see that to create an order we need to send a post request to this URL. So in the request header, we should include the authorization header, which is required, and the content type, which is required. And in the request body, we need to include the purchase units, which is required, and the intent is required. The other parameters are optional. Now let's expand purchase units. And here we can see that the amount is required. Let's expand it. So we can see that the currency code is required and the value is required. So this is the minimum object that we need to send in the request. So we have an object that contains an array and a string. In this array we have another object that contains another object with two values. This is a string and this is another string. So now let's create the request body. So this is the object that we will send. It contains the intent and the purchase units. So purchase units is an array that contains this object. And this object contains this amount object. So amount contains the currency code, which is USD, and the value, which is the total amount that we have just here. Then we need the JSON Web Token and we need the PayPal URL. So this is the first part and this is the extension. So this extension is available just here. Then we need to create the HTTP client. So here we have this HTTP client. We will add the JSON Web Token to the header, and then here we have the message. So the message will be transmitted using the post method to this URL that we already defined just here, and the content will be the JSON object that we created just here. So we will send this JSON object and the type is JSON. So here we will send the request and this is the response. If we have a success response, then we will read the response as a string and we will convert it into a JSON object. Then we will read the ID, which is the order ID. So here we have an example of the request, and this is an example of the response. So we can see that the response contains the ID, which is the order ID. So we will read the order ID and we will save it into this variable PayPal order ID. Then we will send this PayPal order ID to the browser. Now let's run the application again. Let's set the amount, then PayPal. And we obtain this window. So let's log in using the personal account that we created. Let's click on complete purchase. But for the moment the payment is not completed. So to complete the payment, let's click on APIs and SDKs, then JavaScript SDK. Then complete reference. Then let's click on Approve. And let's copy the source code of this onApprove method. So we can copy all of this code. So let's go to the view. And after the create order, we can paste the code. So here we have comma. And let's paste the code. Then let's add comma. Then let's change the URL. So let's delete this. And we will send a request to the checkout controller and the complete order action. So later we need to create this action. So we will send a request using the post method that includes the order ID. Then we will read the response and we will display this alert. So we can delete this code. So we can display an alert based on the value of details. So if details is equal to success, then we will display a bootstrap alert of type success, and this is the message. So we can write the order is created successfully. Otherwise, if details is not equal to success, then we can display another alert and you can write the message failed to create the order. But here the request will not be transmitted because we don't have the header. So we can copy the header from the create order method. So we can copy this header. And let's paste it here. Now let's create the action complete order. So we can create this action complete order that will read a JSON object from the request body. Then we will read the order ID. So order ID that we have here is this order ID. If order ID is null, then we will return a JSON object with the value error. So if we have error, then we will display this alert. Otherwise, if order ID is not null, then we need the JSON Web Token that allows us to send a request to PayPal. And to send a request, we need to go to the documentation website of PayPal. So here let's click on APIs and SDKs, then REST APIs. Then orders. Then capture payment for order. So here we can see that we need to send a post request to this URL and we need to include the order ID in the URL. So first let's create this URL. So we can create this variable. So this is the PayPal URL. This is the first part of the extension. This is the order ID and this is the word capture. Then we need to include the order ID in the URL. So the order ID is required. And then in the header of the request, we can see that we need to include the authorization header and the content type, which is also required. Then here we have the response. Then we can see that the response will include the states. So the states can be one of these values. If the states is completed, this means that the payment has been done successfully. So now let's create the HTTP client. So we will include the authorization header and the content type and the request. Then we will send a request and we will receive the response. If we have a success response, then we will read the response as a string, then we will convert it into a JSON object, and then we will read the value of the states. So if the states is equal to completed, this means that the payment has been done successfully. In this case, we can save the order in the database and we can return a JSON object with the text success to the browser. So if the text is equal to success, then we will display this success message to the user. Otherwise, we will return the message error. Now let's test the application. Let's set the amount, then PayPal. Let's log in using the personal account. Then let's click on Complete Purchase. So this time we have this success message. The order is created successfully. Now to find the payment, we need to log in to the business account. So let's go back to PayPal Developer, then Testing Tools, then Sandbox Accounts. Then let's click on this business account. Let's go to this URL so we can copy it. And let's log in using the business account. So we can copy the email address and the password. Then activity and all transactions. And here we have the last payment. So this is the order amount. Let's click on this link. And here we have the payment details. In the next video, I will show you how to display payment details and how to refund clients. You can find the video link in the description.